Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
I apologize if I am more incoherent than usual. I was up very late last night on a deadline, but uh, I'll do my best. Before we get into full business, though, can I share a little bit of Coolidge information with you?
Oh, please bring it. Bring it.
So, as you know, I don't know if everyone listening knows, I am the vice president of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Library and Museum Standing Committee, which is here in Northampton, Massachusetts. Now, we are not the only Coolidge presidential site. There's also the Coolidge Homestead in Vermont, which is run by the Calvin Coolidge, I think it's Memorial Foundation. And the Memorial Foundation are like real Calvin Coolidge, true believers.
Is this
Uh,
Amity Schlaze?
yeah, Schlaze is the, I think your title's president, president or chair or whatever, and they're better funded. They do real rah rah cool stuff. We're part of a public library, and so we're more what we have is stuff. We have is papers. You can do your Coolidge research at our library, uh, and we try to do programming that just we're sort of laying out the facts, and you can go draw your own conclusions. So this year is the 100th anniversary of when he was sworn in, which true Coolidge diehards know happened at 2:47 in the morning by the light of the kerosene lamp because Warren Harding died of a heart attack and Coolidge was with his dad at the homestead in Vermont. His dad was a notary republic and he did the swearing in the middle of the night. Uh, so we're trying to do some programming, to commemorate this. But we're a shoestring operation. We're having a panel discussion. We're having a little outdoor social event. Nothing. Please come to Northampton for it if you like, but we're not going over the top. And so I happened to go to the Coolidge Foundation, so the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation website to see what they were doing. So it's a 2-day affair, August 2nd and 3rd. Okay, and it starts with they have an annual meeting. They have at 4 o'clock. They have an inauguration gala and dinner with a former governor of Vermont, Jim Douglas, and then they go to the local church and they're going to read the entire autobiography of Calvin Coolidge. And you can sign up to read a passage. And they're going to do that until 2:47 in the morning when they will reenact the swearing in at the exact time.
That's commitment. That's not
Uh,
fandom.
that's hardcore.
Well, it is fandom, right? It means fanatic. So I
Yeah.
guess they're true fans.
Now,
You
if
got to
you're
be
not,
a
if you're,
Coolidge head. What's the nomenclature?
I
Coolidge
really,
head? I don't.
I don't even know. They probably know. They probably coined it. I don't know.
That's
um,
hardcore. You got to admire it. I don't. I mean, I don't think I would do that, but God love them for doing it.
you want to bring the family up for that?
I would come up for something that had I don't know, apple pie, ice cream, maybe some cocktails. I'd love to I'd love to do the history thing at like 3 p.m.
Well, here's
and
here's
then go
you
back
know
to my
here,
Four
here
Seasons.
here's what we're doing, Matt. And it's not totally. So I think we're going to do this July 29th, like around like 2 or 3, which is a few days before the actual day, but it's a Saturday. So I'm going to take credit for this. I said to myself, what is Coolidge's favorite dessert? I did a little googling around, and it was pork apple pie.
Times have changed.
And his wife was known for her butterscotch pie.
That could be good.
So, I talked. We have a local pie bar, Florence Pie Bar. I mean, not all the T's are crossed here. This could still fall through, but I think we're pretty much there.
I'm getting Parks and Rec, a Parks and Rec vibe at this moment. But okay, go ahead.
So we're gonna have pork apple pie and butterscotch pie outdoor on the library lawn with some 1920s music. 15-minute remarks, tell the story of the swearing in, and eat some pie. So if that's your speed,
That's
Matt,
more my
if
speed.
that's your speed, you should come
That
up
is.
to Northampton, July 29th.
But there's a problem with that, Bill. Here's the problem. I hold in my formerly nicotine-stained hands a copy of Filthy Rich Politicians.
Maybe we got to make this a book tour stop.
This is the galley copy. This is not the hard copy. This is what they send out to like reviewers before the book, before it actually publishes. But I have it. That's a milestone. I think the book's out July 18th. So this could be part of my barnstorming.
Yeah, where's the book? Do you have the book tour lined up?
I think it has to start in Northampton, right?
I'm saying we got bookstores. We got you could maybe make this at the Coolidge Library. I don't know. We should be talking.
We should have your people call my people, and we'll start the process. But imagine if you are and by the way, we don't call them DMZ heads. We call them the DMZ Army. Mm-hmm. But if you're a member of the DMZ Army, what better? Plan your vacation, right? You come to Northampton, you go to my book event, you get some pie with Calvin Coolidge and Bill Scher. You're gonna get a friend of the show, David Pietrusia, should be involved in this. If this comes,
he actually pinged me and said, "What are you guys doing for the centennial?" So I don't know if he's coming, but maybe he would come. I don't know.
David would do it because I had him when I was a fellow at the University of Chicago. David, I brought him out to speak, and he took a series of trains to get from New York to Illinois. So I feel like he's a traveling man, and planes, trains, and automobiles, but he'll probably be there.
All right. Well, I've distracted us long enough. We should talk shop.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on, but we can't cover everything. So we did a little pregame.
Now, Matt, I know you don't want to see Donald Trump be renominated. I know you have been open to Ron DeSantis, but you hadn't bought in yet. And perhaps the notion that he is the best poised to take on Trump, that argument has taken a hit the past month. Yesterday, Tim Scott jumps in. Now, Tim Scott, I would think, would be a Matt Lewis kind of Republican, right?
I like Tim Scott a lot. My only concern about Tim Scott is the way that he talks about Donald Trump. I mean, that's not reassuring. But like, if you put Trump aside, which is a big, big thing to put aside, I like Tim Scott. I'd like to see him on the campaign trail because you don't really know how they will comport themselves and how they will fare until they're in the game and they start taking a couple of hits. But yeah, just sort of initial responses, we could do a lot worse than a President Tim Scott.
Do you think he can be the nice guy alternative to Donald Trump, or do you think he's too nice and won't be able to figure out how to beat Donald Trump? Or corollary to that, is he really just auditioning to be Trump's VP?
I think it's more of an audition to be something. It could be Trump's VP. It might just be to elevate his status to run 4 years from now for president. There are a lot of self-serving reasons why ambitious people might want to run for president. And there's even some noble reasons occasionally, to advance an idea, to start a movement, something like that. I think that the idea that you're going to run for president in this current context by being a nice guy and win is really it's a leap of faith, right? I mean, you have to figure maybe there's like a 1% chance that it would work. So your primary reason for running is something else, but there is a chance. I mean, it is within the realm of possibility that, like, let's say DeSantis and Trump were to destroy one another and something big happens in the country and we turn our lonely eyes to Tim Scott. Don't think it's going to happen. Certainly wouldn't bet on it, but within the realm of possibility.
Did you see the clip of Tim Scott being asked about an abortion ban on CBS?
I did not. I'm sure it probably didn't go well, I'm guessing.
Well, the reporter asked him, your colleague from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, has a 15-week abortion ban. Do you support it? And he goes, well, I'm 100% pro-life. But can you believe what these Democrats support? They support all these horrible things with late-term abortions, and she was like, yeah, that's great, but where do you stand on a 15-week abortion ban? And he's like, well, I'm for a real robust debate about abortion, but can you believe these Democrats? Man, they're crazy. We should be talking about that. And she's like, okay, I'm going to try this one more time.
That's reminiscent of Rubio with his talking points. I mean, that's, there's one thing to stay on message, but you want to stay on message without, you want to preserve the plausibility that you're not a robot. You know what I mean? That sounds to me like it's similar to Rubio's. What was it that Rubio kept saying about Obama? I can't remember the phrase.
About he knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, but it was like, let's not something.
Do away with the fiction that he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing.
That's what it was. So did it have that same vibe to it?
I mean, it wasn't a debate stage, so it wasn't quite as high stakes, but you've probably gone through media training before. You probably know the concept of bridging. You don't answer the question you're asked. You answer the question you want to answer. And so he's very rigidly sticking to that technique. And again, I don't think it's going to doom the candidacy out of the box. It wasn't. I don't know if you remember back in 2004 when Wesley Clark jumped in the race late to a lot of fanfare, and then day one gave a very awkward answer about what he would do with Iraq. That's kind of like, I thought you were like the supreme commander of NATO. Yeah, you don't have your Iraq answer down on day one. And that's the problem with jumping in late. Like you go with a lot of hype, and so everything's got to be absolutely on point if you're going to do that. If you don't have your act together, it's really glaring. Tim Scott's announcement, I feel, was not so high wattage. I mean, I checked FoxNews.com the other day; they didn't even have a story on it. Like, he announced on Fox, and FoxNews.com didn't have a story about it on the homepage. So it wasn't like the news of the day. So an awkward answer can be easily forgotten. I just thought it was weird because you're running as like Mr. Evangelical, Mr. Conservative, and like you don't know, you can't give your abortion position. Like, why is this hard for you? Why shouldn't you have a very easy answer to give? You're running a Republican primary, but people who are anti-abortion, just say what you'd ban.
Well, I think this is like this speaks to a deeper fundamental problem on the right today. But I think specific to Tim Scott is that he's trying to run as this likable, positive guy who transcends all of this culture war fighting. And you have to sort of just buy into the notion that somehow magically, by the force of his personality and his smile, he's going to bring people together. And so getting into the nitty gritty and the specifics of an issue like that, if he's debating that issue, he's losing his entire raison d'etre, right? And so I think it's an excuse, though, to not ever grapple with serious policy questions. Like, I honestly, I don't know if he really knows what his position on it is. It's a hard question, to be sure.
Isn't the easy answer, again, not that this is a great general election answer, but for a Republican primary, to say 100% pro-life, I want to see abortion never happen, and I would sign anything that comes to my desk as president that would reduce the number of abortions, whatever it is.
But the problem with that is that then there are exceptions. For example, rape
Mhm.
or life of the mother. I mean, there's serious. There are. This is such a tough
Mhm. Mhm.
topic, and so does Tim Scott want to lock himself into no exceptions and be seen as really radical extremist on the issue? But then if you open the door to some exceptions, then you're not hardcore enough, right? So it's a wedge. It's now become a wedge issue, I think, for Republicans.
I mean, you said just make up your damn mind. Like either you're for exceptions or you're not. I mean, I think like Rubio, for example, has said that he essentially would ban outright, but he would accept something less than that include exceptions. And
Yeah.
Pence has
Rubio's pretty good at, with that big exception being the debate.
right.
Rubio's pretty slick about coming up with stuff like that.
But if you're gonna get that nomination, the first step is Iowa. Iowa has a big anti-abortion Christian conservative community. I mean, I just wouldn't. If I'm Tim Scott, I wouldn't be worrying about general election positioning. I'd be worrying about winning the nomination, and I would just be super duper anti-abortion.
Yeah.
Like that's his base.
I think it's Jonah Goldberg who says, my position on immigration is that we should have one, something to that effect. Like like the big topic here is that Tim Scott probably doesn't actually have a position on abortion, right? Um, which, if you're going to run for president, might be something in this era that you want to think through, and that's probably speaks to But again, though, I think it also is he wants to run on an image, not on details, not on policy, on an image of likable, transcending these bitter squabbles. Um, and I don't think it's the right time, sadly, for that. But I'd love to be surprised by that.
I cannot see how you avoid talking about your abortion position in a Republican primary when the first contest is disproportionately populated with Christian conservatives. It seems impossible to me.
Well, and I mean, I'm not going to argue. I think this speaks to a lack of preparedness, and again, maybe he can get his act together, but not not a great start.
I mean,
Um,
if this was a more traditional contest without a Donald Trump type figure involved, and it's like Bob Dylan in the 1990s or George Bush in 2000, you're not just talking about winning the nomination, but also the general election. Like that's much more complicated. Then you
yeah.
worry about, oh, what am I going to say today? It's going to bite me in the ass tomorrow. Like that, I understand being difficult to navigate. But if I'm Tim Scott, that is the last thing on my mind. I'm just trying to like get in the game in this primary when I'm starting at literally like 0 to 1%, and he's already 100% pro-life. He's already going to have a general election challenge on the subject. So just put it out there.
Well, let's move. During our extensive pre-game planning, you mentioned an idea which I think is very um, hot. It's a great take, and we should debate this a little bit. And uh, your insight is that Ron DeSantis should not run for president. Well, why do you think
Correct.
that?
In 2024. And this thing, I wrote up a draft last night. It's not published in the Washington Monthly yet, but I think in the next few days. Well, what's the argument to run?
Well,
Even
okay. The
though,
argument to run is that, and I will grant you that the argument to run is diminished from what it was a month ago. But the
sure,
argument to run is that there is a window of opportunity that politicians have when they are
right,
hot.
right.
And we've learned when Barack Obama, it was early, he'd been in the Senate for a cup of coffee, but he seized the moment and he ran when he was hot. Conversely, Chris Christie in 2012 was hot, he had a window, and he let it pass him by. And so the lesson is that you can't get a souffle to rise twice. And if you ever have that moment where you're hot and you want to be president, you've got to seize the day. You've got to run. You can't wait 4 years. The world will change in 4 years. And clearly it clearly looked like Ron DeSantis was having a moment, right? But I sense that what you're about to say is that moment may have already passed him by.
That's not quite what I'm saying, but I do address the Chris Christie example, and that's obviously an argument for, even if you're having a tough time, push through. This is when you are peaking. Don't wait 4 years when you're old news. But there's a corollary to that argument, which is Republican presidential candidates have often been rewarded, even if they come up short the next time around. John McCain had a tough race against George W. Bush, but he was positioned
the next in line.
Right. Bob Dole had a tough time with George H.W. Bush, and then he got it in 1996. Mitt Romney came short against John McCain in 2008. Then he was the firm for 2012.
Ronald Reagan, 1976.
Yes. But my argument is that those two sibling historical arguments are all based on pre-Trump Republican Party examples. You look at who ran in 2016 against Donald Trump. Were they positioned for 2024 with Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, John Kasich? No, they are not. They're not beloved for their valiant try against Donald Trump. They were viscerally humiliated. Rand Paul, I should add there. I mean, just publicly humiliated on the debate stage over and over again. Yeah. And their stature diminished afterwards to the point where Cruz and Rubio, they tested the waters. They went to Iowa and New Hampshire. They dipped their toe in. It was freezing cold, and they decided to not go through it one more time. Chris Christie might do it again, but there's almost nobody that thinks that that's going to go well for him. Certainly, he's not polling anywhere. There's no polling evidence to suggest that there's a constituency for him. So
let's dispel the fiction that Chris Christie should have run in 2012.
So the Ron DeSantis argument now is not just that this is your moment. It's that this isn't necessarily Donald Trump's party. It's a Trumpist party. And I have a Trumpist record as governor. And if I put my record out there and argue that it is an exceptionally competent Trumpist record, that people who are partial to Trump now will naturally gravitate to me once they see that I can deliver a Trumpist agenda even better than Donald Trump can. And that argument has been test run for the past 6 weeks. Ever since Ron DeSantis released his book, the end of February, The Courage to Be Free, and there was all this buzz. What great first week sales, #1 New York Times bestseller list, more copies than Barack Obama's Dreams of My Father. And ever since that week, it's all been downhill. Hammered by Trump, snookered by Disney. The indictment comes and DeSantis tries to have his little jabs. He goes on Piers Morgan and makes the case. We get points on he was asked specifically, what the difference between you and Donald Trump? Well, I would have fired Anthony Fauci. We know how to put together a team that focuses on a shared agenda. We put points on the board. That's my leadership style. That argument has gone absolutely nowhere. The margin between him and Donald Trump has widened ever since the book came out.
Okay.
Well, a lot of that's the indictment, but that's to the point. His argument, my record is so great, means nothing compared to I'm fighting the deep state that's trying to prosecute me. So much so that Ron DeSantis has to join in that argument. So
okay.
What does he do differently that makes his record so special, so great that he naturally gets Trump's supporters? That argument is dead in the water. So if he is to run, he needs to do something different that goes right at Trump. And what did I see in the Washington Post the other day? They had a little investigative piece of what's the thinking inside DeSantis's camp. And a person, close says, well, he's gonna go tougher against Trump, but it's gonna be on the high road. He's gonna challenge him on policy, like how he handled Anthony Fauci. DeSantis just did that on Piers Morgan, and nobody cared. That is not going to cut it. So if his belief is this is a Trumpist party, and you can't go at Donald Trump too hard, I would say the risk of you being utterly humiliated by Donald Trump is very high right now. And that is going to be far worse for you in 2028 than just saying, you know what, forget it. It's Donald Trump's party. Bow to Donald Trump. Stay in good with the big guy and try to win those people 4 years later.
All right. First, a piece of advice: publish this today. I think this is a. I think you make a compelling argument, and I also think I don't think I've seen it. Maybe someone else's.
Well, Chris Salissa has a thing on his Substack where he said DeSantis shouldn't run, but it doesn't get into all of these points.
So I think this is a hot topic and timely, and I think you make some valid points. I don't know that I completely agree, but I am.
So how does he do better going forward than the past 6 weeks? Literally, when his book rollout, which is look at how great I am, and here's my life story, here's my record in Florida. How does he do better than what he just did?
Well, okay, but before we get to that, and I apologize, I'm it's almost 88 degrees here today.
Yeah, we're going to be in the 80s too today.
My air conditioning's out, so I've had all the windows in the house and fans. And I have to tell you that the pollen count is it's off the chart. So anyway, bear with me. So I just want to make a few points. I don't think they undermine your thesis, but I think it's important as we understand this. So I think that the biggest difference clearly is the Alvin Bragg, Manhattan DA indictment of Trump. So I think it's a little unfair to fault, DeSantis's book rollout and it didn't work. Like, I think the biggest thing that's happened.
It wasn't like it was rising before that point, and then the indictment came. It was just kind of flat.
Yeah.
And then the indictment came.
I just want to make that point. Like, in my opinion, maybe you disagree. I think that the indictment is the most significant thing that caused Donald Trump's numbers to go up and caused the base to rally around Trump.
So if that's the thinking, then once the indictment fades and we can go back to DeSantis' wonderful record, then things will turn for him.
Well, that's what happened with Mar-a-Lago. Remember, the Mar-a-Lago raid led to a rally, around Trump phenomenon, sort of circle the wagons around Trump. And eventually it faded, and I think it became more of a net negative for Trump in the long run.
Well,
the problem is, Bill, that there could be 3 other indictments.
Yeah.
And I think they'll probably actually have more merit than this one. But I think you'll have the same phenomenon happening where there'll be a rally around Trump. So, like, the point I'm making does nothing to undermine your thesis. But I do think for historical purposes, I would just an asterisk by that point. But I've got a few. I also think it's important to note that I think you misrepresented the way that DeSantis's plan. Like, I don't think DeSantis's plan was to take Trump voters from Trump. Now, you said the people who are partial to Trump, and I think that that's technically correct. But there's about 20, maybe 35%. There's some percent of voters that Trump could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and they're not movable. I don't think DeSantis ever had a plan of peeling them off, right?
Well, look, real quick politics average. Before November, Donald Trump is around 50, he's a little over 50% through most of the latter half of last year It doesn't really change with Mar-a-Lago. It's pretty stable. It only dips, and DeSantis is hanging around, and this may be because there's not that much polling, but he's hanging around around 20, and then after the midterm, then you see Trump starting to dip into the mid to upper 40s, and DeSantis moves up to more like 30. And once you get to, I believe, the indictment, now we're back at Trump 51.4, DeSantis 24.7. So, but even at like Trump's worst point here, which is like turn of like January, it's Trump 44, DeSantis 31. So that's because at that point, some of that Trump vote had come over to DeSantis.
Yeah, but it's not the. I just want to, again, this is a minor point, but I think that there was an acceptance that there was 35% of the vote that Trump.
Those will be bedrock. Those will be,
Yes.
those will be immovable. But some of the relatively softer Trump has to come to DeSantis as well.
Correct.
Look, there's two theories of the case. One is, okay, Trump's like at 45, 48, and I'm going to get the 52. I'm going to go totally anti-Trump. This is not fundamentally a Trumpist party. This is a divided party. I want to get the other half. Or this is the Trumpist party. I got to get that soft Trump vote and keep Trump down to just his hardcore, which is the DeSantis thinking, and I think probably most people's thinking. But
yeah, I just want to get through real quick a couple of my.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
And then just to get them on the record, but
yes,
again, I think your thesis is hard to argue with. I think it was not a crazy idea to think that you could be Trump without the baggage. Trump that actually wins elections. Trump who doesn't send crazy tweets. I don't think that was a crazy theory. I think it was plausible. I do think one thing that happened, Bill, it's not the book rollout per se. I think and I've made this point in my columns at the Daily Beast. I think one thing that's been exposed is that in Florida, Ron DeSantis was able to create this image of himself where he basically controlled everything. And he was able to kind of assiduously cultivate this tough guy image where he could attack reporters, attack other politicians. And I think that facade has been lifted. You talked about that Piers Morgan interview. DeSantis seemed weird. He's got weird facial expressions. His body language isn't great. He didn't look like the same tough guy. I think losing weight might have actually hurt him. This is a weird thing, right? Can't talk about this when it comes to female candidates, right? You'd be accused of like sexism. But I think Ron DeSantis obviously lost weight because he wanted to run for president. I think it was a mistake. I think he looked in this weird Trumpy machismo era. I think DeSantis looked tougher when he had some heft to him. It's just a bizarre thing to say, but I honestly think there is something there. And I just wanted to lay down all those markers, but I still think the question you're asking is, if you're making the decision today, should I run? I think a month ago, the answer is yes. Today, if you're Ron DeSantis and you're looking around and someone's like, okay, do you really want to do this? I'm not sure it's a clear yes at this point.
Look, and we've said this on past shows. The only way to beat Trump is to beat Trump. To say you have to convince people who are maybe not the bedrock Trump, but more sort of partial to Trump, convince them that he is bad. He is bad for the party. And maybe some of his positions are bad. That there's some Trumpist positions which are like not okay, like being an election denier, like being cutesy with Putin, that kind of stuff. That has not been DeSantis's approach. And again, to your point, was it not crazy to think you could be Trump without the baggage and try to finesse it? Sure, not crazy. You tried it. You tried it for a month before the indictment, and it wasn't catching on. In what polls that we have seen, you had nice bookstore turnouts, but that is a tiny, tiny niche of like the broader swath of people you have to convince. So I think if you're going to stay in, you got to say, you know what, I need a different game plan that goes at Trump hard and tries to shape this party.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point about his appearance, I think it's less about what his weight is than about his demeanor. He looks very strong in almost every context, except when talking about Donald Trump. Then he looks weak. Even when he's trying to like contrast, he just looks. You can see that he's trying to finesse it, not punch him in the face.
They're gun shy, right? Like
yes,
like even if they do it, there's a timidity to it.
If that's your vibe, then like you should question your choices. Like, why are you running against the guy that you are afraid of? Look,
I just the only point I would make, and then I'll get off this. The only point I would make is, I don't think the premise of DeSantis running was wrong. I don't even think the strategy was a bad strategy necessarily. I think the execution was bad so far, and I think the Alvin Bragg indictment is a complete monkey wrench into the plan, right? And like none of that matters in the sense that like, what does DeSantis do today? Well, it is what it is. This is the world he lives in. But Bill, you made an interesting point at the beginning that I think we should circle back to, because one might say, okay, it's worth a shot. Maybe DeSantis should run anyway. It'll give people a choice. It'll elevate Ron DeSantis's. But as I think you pointed out, the potential downside of running against Trump is way higher than running in a normal primary against, probably even an incumbent, maybe.
I mean, Ted Cruz was a pretty well-liked figure amongst evangelical conservatives in 2014. The conservatives are very happy with the way he tried to shut down the government and, to fund Obamacare and all that kind of stuff. Other people were not happy with him, but he had his fans. And he ended the presidential primary just humiliated. He recovered enough that he could barely beat Beto O'Rourke in 2018 and have a podcast. But beyond like salvaging his own seat, he is not a strong figure in the party right now, nor is Marco Rubio's reputation took a massive hit. Rand Paul was once the most interesting man in politics. Now he's an occasional, gadfly vote, on unanimous consent things, and that's about it. So you don't really survive contact with Donald Trump. I mean, look, you could be John Kasich and say, I'm going to do my best shot. If I lose, I'm going to endorse Joe Biden next time around because I'm sick of this party. But he had to plant that flag. He had to effectively get out of the party. Jeb Bush went into retirement.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Bill. I think you've made a pretty good case that DeSantis, if he thought this was going to be his window, like if he thought this was his golden opportunity, think again. It's very dicey, and there's a major downside to running. I still, though, think, what is Ron DeSantis like? Is Ron DeSantis going to have a better chance in 2028? Like in 2028, the whole world's going to look different. There's going to be people maybe we don't even know yet, like the next J.D. Vance or Josh Hawley is going to get elected between now and then. And DeSantis, won't he now look like he backed down? I mean, he's effectively running. I know he hasn't officially announced his presidency, but for all practical purposes, he is effectively running. I mean, when I was down in Florida, and I met with two different Florida journalists, and in both cases I said, is Ron DeSantis going to run? And they both looked at me and said, Ron DeSantis is running for president.
Mhm.
Like, is he going to run? It's like, he is running. So like, won't it look like he backed down? And so maybe
it's all bad choices. It's all bad choices. They all come with risks. But if your calculation is this is a Trumpist party, and if I run against Donald Trump and a Trumpist party and I lose, I am dead in the water forever after that. I will be totally stripped to the bone, humiliated. Compare that with being a little teased that I backed down before fully getting in, but I'll get Donald Trump's lavish praise for being loyal. And whether Trump wins or loses in 2024, he can't run in 2028. And so I can at least try to play the elder statesman card and someone who stayed loyal. Could there be young whippersnappers that best me at that point? Absolutely. There's no guarantees in any of this stuff. And you can never run for president with a guarantee.
And you know what will happen too? If DeSantis doesn't run, then Donald Trump will, die or go to jail, and Clint Youngkin's going to become president. This is what I can tell you. Like, every time I'm like writing a column, and I'm like waiting for an edit to come back to me, I will always say, okay, I'm going to go for a walk, because as soon as I leave my house, I'll get an email that's like, it's ready. It's like a watch pot doesn't boil or whatever. I don't know. But so like Ron DeSantis, it's one of those things. Like, remember in 92, everybody thought George H.W. Bush was impossible to beat in a general election, right? And nobody runs. Like, Mario Cuomo doesn't run as a Democrat, and you end up getting Bill Clinton.
Right. Because we had this big shift from like being a war hero to hitting a recession. But that's like more sort of traditional political tectonic plates shift. Trump's position in the party is pretty clear. You know what you're dealing with. These tires have been kicked. And it's just a gut call. Can I beat him? Can I consolidate the half of the party that's not with them and maybe get a little bit more by challenging his reason of being? Or is that not really possible, and therefore better not to be humiliated by him right now? I went over to repeating ourselves. I do have to run and get this dog a couple shots.
Let me make one more point, and then I'll shut up. This point reinforces your thesis. The nomination might not be worth having anyway. And the off chance that Ron DeSantis beats Donald Trump and becomes the Republican nominee, there's no guarantee he becomes president. And in fact, Donald Trump could sabotage his chances and make sure he doesn't beat
Joe Biden. He could run third party or what have you.
So the nomination, even if you do the impossible and defeat Donald Trump and the Republican Party, then what? You're just going to walk into, it's like from Ocean's 11. What's the line? Let's say we get through the door with the police with the Uzis and past the security guard. Are we just supposed to walk into the desert with the money? It might not be worth being the nominee.
Well, yeah, but if you get the nomination, at least you're in the final. You're in the final four, if you will. But my point is, if you're not willing to run against Trump, then don't run against Trump. If that's your calculation, and DeSantis seems to be halfway there, even though he might still run because it's his moment. But anyway, I want to very, very quickly. I want to ask you, what do you think about NPR leaving Twitter and Substack starting the Substack Notes? Are you enticed at all by Substack and Substack Notes, and worried that NPR's leaving of Twitter is going to start an exodus away from Twitter?
I am enticed. I am enticed by Substack. I have a Substack newsletter, and I'm now on Substack Notes. I dipped my toes into the water yesterday and started noting. I don't know what it's called. I started texting, tweeting, whatever. The functionality is it's much more similar to Twitter than other attempts to supplant Twitter have been. But I still don't know if it's there yet. I still don't quite understand Substack Notes. Um, Honestly, I think someone needs to basically rip off Twitter. It needs to be as intuitive, as user friendly as Twitter. And then I do think Twitter would be susceptible to being supplanted. Um, I don't know if Substack is there yet. I think it was a good bet what they're trying to do, and it would not upset me at all if it took off. Um,
Are you unnerved with what Elon has been doing lately?
yeah, totally. I mean, the guy's like a loose cannon, obviously. Um, when it comes to NPR leaving, I think um, it's a lot of kind of window dressing. I don't think it's going to start a mass exodus. I don't think it's going to hurt Twitter at all. Um, but I do think that Twitter is potentially vulnerable to a mass exodus, but is not contingent on NPR leading the way. It's contingent on there being an alternative that is that captures what people liked about Twitter, and I think that Substack is closer to that than anyone else has gotten so far. Don't know if they're there yet. I'm still a little confused by how it works. And it could be that they could fix that even and resolve the problems and the concerns.
I just think that I'll say maybe it's just these few points, and I really need to go. I think it's weird that Elon keeps attacking journalists because journalists are really important to be on Twitter. Like
Yes.
he seems to think he's in competition with the media and doesn't realize that Twitter doesn't produce journalism. It is a platform for journalists. But obviously, it's much more than that. Um, but it doesn't do its own reporting,
Yeah.
and so
Well,
half
by
the
the way,
re-
one thing I hate about what he did was, and I know you're in a rush, but changing the verification. The problem is now, whether you paid for the blue check mark or you
Mhm.
earned the blue check mark,
It's blurred,
it's impossible to distinguish.
right?
So I can't tell. The blue check mark was about verification. Like you are who you say you are,
Mhm.
and presumably you are someone of some note. That is gone. I can't tell if you are legit and important verified figure who is who he says he is, or if you're just someone who gives them $6 a month. There's
Mhm.
no way to distinguish.
Right. But I primarily use Twitter. I mean, I use it for self promotion, but honestly, uh, Twitter is a very poor traffic driver to news sites, and it's been repeated a lot lately because of NPR leaving. People say everyone in the business knows Twitter doesn't drive traffic to your sites. That's
It doesn't
not
sell books either,
right.
typically.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Um, but I use Twitter primarily to follow the news. I have lists of journalists, uh, and that's I don't jump from site to site. I follow my feed. If journalists conclude, you know what, this I'm not getting anything out of this. It doesn't drive traffic to my sites. Elon is just besmirching our reputations. And you know what, this Substack Notes thing, it may not be as big, but it's
Hmm.
a community of writers who are more engaged in the substance, and I get some value having the interaction with them, and the functionality is pretty similar. So I'm going to go decamp over there. I mean, I feel there's more of a chance of that happening than I felt like with Mastodon
Yep,
and
I agree.
Post.news because there's
Yep.
already a writer community pre-existing there to build upon. It's not totally from scratch.
And
Uh,
it's already a name that Substack is already a strong brand.
yeah,
It's not Mastodon, whatever the hell that is. It's
right.
a brand that's recognizable, that's respected, and that, as you noted, big name people have already migrated their newsletters to. So why not this? And so I do think that this is the most vulnerable Twitter has been for because because Elon and Twitter are pushing people away, and B, because Substack is so far the best alternative. I just don't know if they're there yet.
Okay. All right. All right.
All
Really got
right.
to run. What do you got to plug?
Pre-order Filthy Rich Politicians today.
All right.
See you
You
guys
heard it.
next week.
All right. Take
Thanks,
care.
Bill.